everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into something I think a lot of us are probably interested in.
Yeah.
It's about oxalates in coffee.
Ooh, that's a good one.
We've had a bunch of listener questions about this.
Yeah.
A lot of questions about like kidney stones and all that.
Hmm.
So we found this article that seems pretty good, and I think it'll give us a lot to talk about. It's from a website called Coffee at Corner. And the article is titled, How High in Oxalate is Coffee?
That's a good question. How high in oxalate is coffee?
Yeah. So let's get into it.
Yeah, let's figure this out.
Okay, so like first things first, is coffee actually high in oxalates?
Well, actually, no. Coffee is generally considered a low oxalate beverage.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah.
But I mean, low is kind of relative, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, low doesn't automatically mean it's like a free-for-all, right?
Right.
Especially if you have certain health conditions or if you're on certain medications.
Yeah.
Those things can affect how your body processes these oxalates. That makes sense.
So if you have any concerns, like always, talk to your doctor.
Yeah, good advice.
They'll give you the best advice for your situation.
Okay, so coffee's low in oxalates.
Yeah.
That's good news for a lot of us. But now I'm curious,
Yeah.
like, what even are oxalates?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird word, right?
Yeah.
Oxalates are basically these naturally occurring compounds. You find them in plants and animals,
Huh.
and even in us.
Interesting.
They're in a lot of foods that we eat.
Okay.
And for most people, they're not harmful.
Okay, that's reassuring. But I'm guessing there are times when they can cause problems.
Yeah, you're right. There are a few potential issues that can be linked to having high oxalate levels.
Okay, like what?
So the article mentions two things specifically. One is kidney stones.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah, and the other is vulvar pain.
Okay.
And they even link to like a medical study about kidney stones.
Oh, wow.
So it seems like there's some real science behind this.
Okay, so it's not just like a made-up thing.
Right. It's not like oxalates are inherently bad.
But for some people, they can cause problems.
And how many people are we talking about? Like, is this a common thing?
Well, the article says that only around 7% of people have this genetic predisposition
Okay.
to problems related to high oxalate levels.
Okay, so not super common.
Right. It's like 1 in 14 people, roughly.
Okay, so that kind of puts it into perspective.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something that everyone needs to be super worried about,
Right.
but for those who are sensitive to it, it's definitely something to be mindful of.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's bring it back to coffee.
Yeah.
Does drinking coffee actually increase the oxalate levels in our bodies?
Good news again. It actually doesn't seem to. The research shows that drinking coffee doesn't directly increase your oxalate levels.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. The amount that you absorb from coffee just isn't enough to cause harm for most people.
That's really good to know. So, like, I can have my morning coffee and not feel guilty about it.
Right.
Okay, but there's one more thing I'm curious about.
Okay, what's that?
The article mentions something about the type of roast affecting oxalate levels.
Oh, yeah. That's where it gets kind of interesting.
Yeah, what's the deal with that?
So it seems like darker roasts, like if you're a French roast fan,
Mm-hmm.
those tend to have a higher oxalate content than lighter roasts.
Whoa,
It's a
interesting.
small detail, but it could be important for some people.
Yeah, especially those who are trying to keep their oxalate intake low.
Right. So even within the world of coffee, there's like nuance and things to consider.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So maybe if you're concerned about oxalates, you might want to explore lighter roasts.
It could be worth trying.
This is really interesting stuff. We're already learning so much about our favorite beverage.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's more to come, so stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive.
It's going to be good.
All right, see you then.
See you, Emmy. Welcome back, everyone, for part 2 of our deep dive.
Yeah, we're back. Still thinking about all this coffee and oxalate stuff.
It's pretty interesting, right?
Yeah. I know at the end of the last part, we were talking about how darker roasts have more oxalates.
Right.
I'm curious, like, why is that?
That's a good question.
Does the article say anything about that?
You know, I don't think it really goes into detail about like the specific reasons,
Oh, okay.
like the chemical reasons or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's like a little mystery.
A coffee mystery.
Maybe a future deep dive.
I like it. Okay, but for now, let's
Yeah.
get back to like what we do know
Okay.
about oxalates in coffee.
Yeah.
So if coffee's low in oxalates
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't like directly raise the levels in our bodies,
Right.
then should we even be worried about it at all?
Well, that's where it gets a little tricky
Okay.
because it depends on the individual.
Ice.
Like for the average coffee drinker who has a cup or two a day
Mm-hmm.
is probably not a big deal.
Okay.
But for people who might be more sensitive to oxalates,
Mm-hmm.
maybe because of some health condition, then it might be something to pay more attention to.
So it's not so much about giving up coffee.
No, I don't know.
More about just being aware.
Right, knowing your own body and making choices that are right for you.
That makes sense. So what are some practical takeaways that people listening can actually use?
Okay, so thinking about you, the listener, a few things pop up. First, if you have a history of kidney stones or you've experienced vulvar pain and you're worried about oxalates, talk to your doctor.
Yeah, good advice.
They can give you the best advice for your specific situation.
It's always good to involve your doctor in these kinds of decisions.
Absolutely.
What else?
Okay, second takeaway.
Yeah.
For anyone who's just trying to minimize their oxalate intake in general, we know that lighter roasts might be a good choice.
So instead of that dark French roast,
Right.
maybe try a blonde roast for a bit.
Yeah, see if you like it.
It's like a small change, but it could make a difference. This is so interesting. I feel like I'm learning so much about coffee.
It's cool, right?
Yeah, and I thought I already knew a lot about it.
There's always more to learn, though.
That's true. Well, in part 3 of our deep dive, we'll be wrapping up our exploration of oxalates in coffee.
Okay.
So stay tuned.
We'll see you there.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Last part of our deep dive.
Yeah, we made it.
So we've talked a lot about oxalates in coffee. I think it's time to, really answer the big question.
Yeah, what's the verdict?
Should coffee lovers be worried about oxalates?
You know, after all this research and discussion, I think for most people the answer is no.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah, coffee is generally low in oxalates.
Right.
And for the majority of people, it's not going to cause any problems.
What's a relief?
But of course, we have to remember there are always those individual factors.
Right.
Some people are just more sensitive to certain things.
And oxalates are no exception.
Exactly. So if you have a history of kidney stones or you've experienced vulvar pain, it's really important to talk to your doctor.
They can give you the best advice.
Absolutely.
Okay, so personalized advice is key.
For sure.
But for everyone else who's just looking to minimize their oxalate intake, we learned that choosing lighter roasts is a good strategy.
Yeah, that seems to be the takeaway.
So switch up your routine a bit.
Right.
Maybe try a lighter roast.
It could make a difference.
This whole deep dive has been fascinating.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I thought I knew a lot about coffee, but there's always more to learn.
Always.
It's like coffee's more complex than we think.
Yeah, it's a whole world in a cup.
And speaking of more to learn, as we wrap up, I want to leave you all with something to think about.
Okay, hit me.
We talked about how roast type affects oxalate levels.
Right.
But what about other things?
Like what?
Like different brewing methods.
Oh, interesting.
Or even different types of coffee beans.
I never thought about that.
Could those things also play a role?
That's a great question.
Something to ponder, right?
It is.
Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Time flies when you're talking coffee.
It really does. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
And keep those coffee curiosities brewing.
See you next time.